Right after I said the famous words of He-Man, Nick Fury spit out all his popcorn and he started laughing when I sounded just like He-Man. After I lifted Mjolnir high in the air, even Thor heard and saw me when I said I have the power, and then that crushed Thor when he saw his armor all around my body. And then Nick Fury laughed and said, "I knew it, you funny motherfucker," Nick Fury said out loud. And then Natasha Romanoff walked in to see Nick Fury laughing with Agent Coulson, and then Natasha Romanoff asked Nick Fury, "What's so funny?" And Nick Fury walked up to Natasha Romanoff and laughed in her face, and she said, "Sir, please restrain yourself." And then Nick Fury said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't laughed that hard in a long time," and I was still screaming like He-Man. And then Natasha Romanoff asked, "What the hell is wrong with him? Why is he screaming like that?" And then said loudly, "So did you guys get the joke?" And then they both said yes, definitely, and they all gave a thumbs up. And Clint Barton was still laughing and he was turning red. And then Natasha Romanoff asked Clint Barton, "What did he do and what did he say?" And then Clint Barton said, "You should have been here, Nat, it was friggin' hilarious." And then Clint Barton said, "I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing." And then I screamed loudly again just like He-Man and I said, "I have the power." And then Natasha Romanoff started to smile, and then finally she started laughing, and then she farted, and then she, "Oh my god, that's what he said." And then Natasha Romanoff farted again, and then she said, "Oh my god, I think I pissed my pants." And then they all laughed and I just sighed, and then I asked them all, as I said very loudly, "So I assume all of you got the joke?" And then they all said yes loudly, and then I said, "After you are all done laughing, please join me down here, because we are not keeping the hammer and it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to Thor." And then I said, "Come on out, Thor, I know you're over there." And then Thor walked into the light and he said, "Hi, I'm Thor Odinson and I need my hammer back, please." And then he walked into the base around Thor's hammer, and then Thor walked in and he saw me holding his hammer in my right hand and he looked very upset and said, and then I said, "Here, take your hammer back, sir." And then Thor reached out and tried to grab it, and then he hesitated, and then I said, "You're a fool, Thor, your powers were never in this hammer, it was in yourself the entire time. You and Odin call yourselves gods, but you are not gods because you and your father have not earned that title, but I am a true god, Thor, and I earned my title by living among humanity and growing up with them and helping them when they need it most, and even when they don't need me I'll always be here to help. I am infinity." And then Thor said, "It can't be." And then I said, "Yes, it's me, Thor, bound in human form and made into reality and woven into creation itself." And then my eyes glowed bright white, and then the infinity symbol lit up on my hand, and then Thor said, "No wonder you can lift my hammer, you are infinity, the strongest god and the son of the creator himself." And then my armor formed around me, and then my suit lit up with a vibrant yellow light, and then I said, "What if I could train you, Thor, so you no longer need this hammer?" And then I stuck out my hand and I said, "I offer you this, son of Odin. For once in your family's lineage one of your kind will wield the powers of a true god, but you must do everything I say within reason, of course." And then Thor begged on his knees and he said, "I'll do anything," to Mjolnir again. And then I said, "Good." And then I took Thor inside my pocket dimension, and it's also my own personal hyperbolic time chamber that I used very often for billions of years so I could learn how to control my powers. And then I took Thor inside the hyperbolic time chamber, and it was there that I turned Thor the boy into a real man. I taught how to do the Saitama training, and I even taught Thor the Hercules method, and then I went even further and I also taught Thor how to use ki energy during a fight, and I taught Thor that he doesn't need his hammer, he never did. And then very quickly after I taught Thor to do 100 burpees every day, then Thor became truly mighty and he's now truly worthy of the powers he's been given. And my hyperbolic time chamber works in such a way that you're immortal in my hyperbolic time chamber. And then me, Thor, stepped out of my hyperbolic time chamber, and only a few seconds passed in Earth and Thor lifted up his hammer without a challenge, and then instantly Thor's powers returned. And then Thor said, "You were right, my friend, I never needed my hammer for all my powers." And then Thor said, "Thank you, infinity." And then I said, "Please call me James Gray, because my friends and family call me James Gray."